Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is LB the Realist, and this is Surrealistic Studios, where the real is surreal. I appreciate everybody's here today. It's been a minute for me, and I'm trying to jump back into it. So, I've noticed everybody talking about Pago lately, and honestly, I didn't know what the hell Pago even was. So, I had to look it up. I watched a few videos on it, Jimmy Dore and Kyle Kalinske and some other people. And I'm still a little fuzzy on it, but as I see it, Pago is basically paying as you go, paying for your bill, your legislation, or whatever it is as you go, instead of just proposing a new bill or legislation or whatever, and you don't know how you're going to pay for it, and you just run with it, and then you just worry about it later. Which, in essence makes sense, but when you contrast that to how the real world of politics operates, we have endless amounts of money for war. We have endless amounts of money to give away to rich people and to foreign governments, so it's honestly bullshit. And a lot of people that are, are smarter than me in this area, or that are more well informed, I should say, they said that this is actually bad. So 3 people have come out against this. Ro Khanna, Justice Democrat. Tulsi Gabbard came out against this as well, and also Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The only three. They didn't even say Bernie Sanders. Well, Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat, so I guess he wouldn't be included in that list, right? Yeah, so, a lot of people are defending it. They're saying that it's actually a good thing, and not only that, but they can bypass it. They have something in it that they can basically bypass it with the majority vote. So let me go ahead and read a little bit from this article, or the whole article. It's a short one. This is from The Week, and it's from today, and it kind of clarified things a little bit more for me. Hopefully it'll do the same for you if you don't know what Pago that is. So it's, what is Pago, and why are the Democrats fighting over it? With the start of the new Congress on Thursday, Democrats officially took over the House of Representatives. Right off the bat, the party began fighting internally over the basics of its budget process. That might sound wildly arcane, but it's actually a fight that reveals the growing power struggle between the Democratic Party's establishment and its insurgent left wing over the very foundation of the party's economic agenda. At the issue is the so-called Pago rule, which stands for pay as you go, and it is pretty much what it sounds like: a rule that Congress must pay for its budget decisions as it makes them, rather than pass legislation that increases deficit spending on net. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic Party old guard want to resurrect Pago. The party's up-and-coming progressive wing, led by newly sworn-in Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat from New York, and Representative Ro Khanna, Democrat from California, is opposed to the idea. We can quickly dispense with the economic merits of Pago. They're essentially non-existent. Federal deficit spending is a positive good, at least whenever the economy is below full employment, which it basically always is. Setting that aside, the federal government also controls the supply of the currency, meaning a debt crisis is literally impossible. Federal deficit spending at the wrong time might increase inflation, but that's about it. There are actually 2 Pago rules. One is merely a point of order for Congress, an internal rule for how the legislature handles debate and what bills it brings up for votes. That's what the Democrats are debating. The other Pago rule is an actual federal law. Both versions of Pago have been popping up in and out of existence over the last few decades. The federal law was first established in 1990, then allowed to expire in 2002. Congress passed a new Pago law in 2010, which remains in effect today. Whenever Congress adjourns, if everything is passed in that session, if everything it passed in that session winds up increasing net deficit spending, federal law requires the executive branch to apply across-the-board spending cuts to balance out the numbers. The congressional rule says that in the course of its internal deliberations, Congress won't pass bills without making them deficit neutral. And each chamber, the House and the Senate, has its own version of the rule. In 2011, Republicans replaced the House's version of Pago with Cut Go, which requires spending cuts to offset new spending increases, but doesn't require offsets for tax cuts. What Democratic leadership wants to do is ditch cut-go and go back to the original pay-go rule for the House of Representatives. The progressives would rather have neither. That sums up the legislative technicalities. The politics of pay-go debate are just as puzzling. Any federal law passed by Congress and the president can also be waived by Congress and the president. Any internal procedural rule Congress imposes on itself, it can also waive. And this has happened over and over with pay-go. Versions of the rule were suspended to pass everything from the GOP's 2017 tax cut package to the 2012 extension of the Bush tax cuts to the 2008 bank bailouts and the Democratic 2009 economic stimulus. In other words, both parties are pure opportunists. They tend to pass the pay-go rules either to concern troll the opposing party when it holds the White House, or to prove to their own moderates that they're serious and responsible. And both parties have temporarily waived the rules whenever they got in the way of big bills they wanted to pass. So it's all bullshit, basically, is what they're saying. The strangest part, the assumption that deficits are always bad and paying for spending is always good. Paying for spending is always good is already ubiquitous across both parties in Washington. As a result, in the unusual circumstance where a congressional majority is willing to pass a bill that's deficit financed, there's also a congressional majority willing to suspend pay-go pretty much by definition. Indeed, the Congressional Progressive Caucus straight up said that the Democratic leadership have committed to us that pay-go will not be an impediment to advancing key progressive priorities in the 116th Congress. As a result, the caucus is going to go ahead and support the return of pay-go. Damn. Progressive opponents make the straightforward point that even if the rule will be waived in practice, reinstituting pay-go will make it at least marginally harder for Democrats to pass the big-ticket items that are revving up their own base, such as Medicare for All. Notably, the Democratic Party old guard that supports pay-go really hasn't bothered arguing for the rule on the merits. Instead, they argue it doesn't really matter since the Senate still has its own pay-go rule. Pelosi's office also offered a kind of 11-dimensional chess strategic justification. If Democrats don't impose pay-go on themselves and pass deficit increases, the federal pay-go law will kick in, and it would direct Trump's Office of Management and Budget to impose mandatory cuts on a bunch of different programs, including Medicare, to offset the deficit increase. Democrats would like to avoid that. If offsets must happen, they'd like to make sure they take the form of tax hikes or spending cuts friendly to liberal priorities. The way to do that, Democratic leadership argues, is to pass the offsets themselves by adhering to their own congressional pay-go rule. Under that logic, the first goal should be to kill the federal law entirely, which would then make it safe to abandon the congressional pay-go rule. And the Congressional Progressive Caucus did say leadership will allow them to propose a bill to that effect. The real test of the leadership's good faith will be if they allow bills eliminating the federal law to move forward. At any rate, it looks like the Democratic leadership will be able to pass the pay-go rule. The positive spin on the fight is that it puts the merits of the debate front and center like never before. But the darker the interpretation is that resurrecting pay-go will give Democratic leadership more centralized control over what the bills make their way through the House. And that will allow the party's old guard to keep the rising progressive wing on a tighter leash than we already are, right? So basically, what I'm hearing is this is just another way for them to slow down progressive progress. And, that's horrible. So let me know what you guys think in a comment section below. Did I pretty much cover it all here? We covered pay-go, cut-go, which requires spending cuts to offset new spending increases. And again, pay-go is when you pay for your legislation right at the time, so you already have the money for what you're talking about, and then you go ahead and pay for it. Again, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Like this video if you like, share it, and subscribe to me if you haven't before so we can keep this ball rolling. All right, Much love. Until next time, keep fighting a good fight.